So they basically did a little pre-post, and on the post test from the first time that they were doing a module to like a following semester, there was a decrease in the overall scores. However, the decrease was still higher than the pretest on the very first time. So even though there was like between the initial treatment, which is like the introduction of the ethics module, to the next semester when they are actually going to go back and like do another pretest to see, okay, has there been any change since they've last done this? So over a period of time, have they decreased? And yes, they did decrease in terms of like their attitudes and whatnot, but it was still higher than it was on that initial pretest. Now, the next thing that they tested was a post-test after a second round of treatment. And what they did find is that there was a higher increase from the second round. So they basically described this almost as like a booster shot in terms of making it so that the initial treatment like helped to introduce ethics and kind of like helped increase self-efficacy and attitudes and whatnot. It decreased over time because they weren't engaging with this, but then when they engaged in the ethics module again a little bit later, then it increased it even higher than it was previously. So then one might ask, okay, well, what happens if you do even more instead of just one a semester? So the second section, which is on page 655, which is titled "A second module in the same semester provides little added benefit," they indicate on page 656, quote, "We found no significant difference between students who received one module and those who received two, or even between students who received 0 modules and those who received 2. A little bit further down. In other words, receiving either 1 or 2 modules appears to confer benefit to self-efficacy, but 2 modules did not confer significantly more benefit than just 1, end quote. As I mentioned in recent episodes on ethics, it's important to figure out at what point is there a saturation point. When is there diminishing returns for focusing on ethics within computing classes? And while this appears to kind of give some suggestion that, well, maybe you only need to do it once a semester, I would argue that we can't necessarily make any generalizable conclusions from this. Maybe the second module wasn't very enjoyable. Maybe it didn't connect to students in a particular way that the first one did. Or maybe something happened in like society that made ethics less valued or less important than it was previously. Or maybe something happened in the school, like some kind of a traumatic event, and that traumatic event somehow related to ethics. All of this could kind of have an impact on it. So we can't necessarily make any generalizable conclusions, but it does lead to some interesting questions. Again, what point is the saturation point for the number of ethics courses or embedded modules that we should include in a class?